As Director Tenet has pointed out, Secretary Powell presented evidence last week that Baghdad has failed to disarm its weapons of mass destruction, willfully attempting to evade and deceive the international community.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass death.
Terrorist organizations. Terrorists.
Terrorism.
Americans should not expect one battle, but a lengthy campaign.
Today our strikes against these terrorists continue.
Bringing the troops back home over a period of time. I never said so quickly, but over a period of time.
These terrorists could pose a growing threat beyond that region, including to the United States.
We don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud.
The smoking gun that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
Bipartisanship is the hallmark of American foreign policy. These terrorists are unique in their brutality.
They hate our freedoms.
We will conduct a systematic campaign of airstrikes against these terrorists.
Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
To degrade and ultimately destroy the terrorist group known as ISIL.
I'm going to bomb the shit out of them.
The senator's got his facts wrong. I have not suggested there's a connection between Iraq and 9/11.
With respect to 9/11, of course, you've had the story that's been public out there. The Czechs alleged that Mohammed Atta, the lead attacker, met in Prague with a senior Iraqi intelligence official 5 months before the attack.
Our intelligence sources tell us that he has attempted to purchase high-strength aluminum tubes suitable for nuclear weapons production. The British government has learned that Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa.
CIA officials warned members of the president's staff the intelligence was not good enough to make the statement, Iraq tried to buy uranium from Africa.
John McLaughlin was lying. Tenet was fabricating things. That didn't matter. We knew we were going to war. Same thing exists with regard to Iran today. Wolfowitz, Crystal, Pearl, Cheney, Rumsfeld wing of my political party, the Republican Party. And it got a lot of allies in the Democratic Party, too, not least of which was Hillary Clinton at times.
Basically, every country creates their own narrative story. And you know, my old job at the State Department was what people used to joke as the chief propagandist job. We haven't talked about propaganda. Propaganda, I'm not against propaganda. Every country does it, and they have to do it to their own population. And I don't necessarily think it's that often.
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
Then Greenwald revealed details about an NSA data mining tool called Boundless Informant that details and even maps by country the voluminous amount of information it collects from computer and telephone networks. The Boundless Informant documents also showed the agency collected more than 3 billion pieces of intelligence from U.S. computer networks over a 30-day period ending March 2013.
As far as the allegations of CIA hacking into Senate computers, nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, we wouldn't do that.
I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
Well, we don't torture people. Let me say that again to you. We don't torture people. Okay?
Come on, George.
We don't torture people.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed.
We don't torture people.
Waterboarding.
We do not. I don't talk about techniques, and we don't torture people. Now listen to me. I want you to listen to me.
They asked me, what do you think about waterboarding, Mr. Trump? I said, I love it. I love it. I think it's great. And I said, the only thing is we should make it much tougher than waterboarding.
This man says his genitals were given electric shock treatment. Others said they'd been forced to sign confessions for crimes they didn't commit.
We were wearing press badges. I had a satellite phone and a camera. The soldier called his base. Then he forced us onto the ground and said, "You journalists are all terrorists." The moment we arrived, a female soldier told us to take off our clothes. She would tell me, "Go shower," and I would refuse. And then she would strip me of my clothes and pour freezing water on me. It was the middle of winter. It was so cold. This detainee was tortured in front of my eyes, only 3 meters from my cell, tortured by dogs to confess to a crime he never committed.
It was not torture.
I received a telephone call from a Mr. Saleh. He said, can you help me? He said, the Americans took my money and they hurt me very bad. And I just came from Abu Ghraib. He told me of one incident where he was stripped nude, and they tied a rope to his penis with 7 or 8 other men, and then they would, these were American personnel, he's telling me, and they would push one man, and all of them would fall, and they'd be joking and laughing and mocking him.
Strikes against these terrorists continue.
It has such precision, and they have laser-guided weapons that allow those remote pilots to be able to target the individual or the location with tremendous precision.
A hospital was mistakenly struck.
42 people were killed in the strike that destroyed the Kunduz facility run by the charity Doctors Without Borders.
The investigation found that the incident resulted from a combination of unintentional human errors, process errors, and equipment failures.
With tremendous precision,
Coalition forces will make every effort to spare innocent civilians from harm.
A recent investigation by Amnesty International and Air Wars showed the U.S.-led coalition killed more than 1,600 civilians during the 2017 offensive.
The president has come out and has said that we need near certainty of the target, who it is, as well as near certainty that there'll be no collateral. Now, none of this is risk-free. The drones, the predators, are key to making sure that we are able to carry out these operations when necessary, but with the greatest accuracy and precision.
Small groups of killers have the capacity to do great harm.
Make no distinctions among military and civilians, including women and children.
Bushmaster, Crazy Horse, we have individuals going to the scene, looks like possibly picking up bodies, picking up the wounded. Yeah, we're trying to get permission to engage.
There hasn't been a single collateral death.
Come on, let us shoot.
We don't know yet how many special forces might be needed, how many trainers and surveillance.
And covert operations.
You're going to have to pull back from this area while we go after their leadership and their economic infrastructure.
We'll provide training and equipment to terrorists.
This is a major Iraqi success story, helped by the Departments of State and Energy.
These strikes have protected our commitment to American energy.
Energy matters to America's foreign policy. Above all, making sure that the American people's access to energy is secure.
So you believe we can go in and take the oil?
We should have taken the oil.
This country needs an all-out, all-of-the-above strategy that develops every available source of American energy.
Drill, baby, drill.
Natural gas. It's the bridge fuel that can power our economy with less of the carbon pollution that causes climate change. Under my administration, America is producing more oil today than at any time in the last 8 years.
The melting ice caps are opening new drilling opportunities as well as new maritime routes.
We're opening up more than 75% of our potential oil resources offshore. We've added enough new oil and gas pipeline to encircle the earth and then some.
Here in the United States, we increased oil production by nearly 700,000 barrels a day.
We've quadrupled the number of operating rigs to a record high. So we are drilling all over the place right now.
That's a shameless pitch for the Foreign Service and the State Department.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me and he said, "We've made the decision, we're going to war with Iraq." I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that."
He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
Cost Plus encourages you to run up the cost of a program because you are going to get a percentage of the end result.
What we really were doing was exploiting third world countries, economically developing countries, and creating huge amounts of debt for those countries, using that debt to hire our own corporations to build big infrastructure projects in those countries. And in the end, we'd go back and say, hey, since you can't pay your debts, sell your oil or some other resource real cheap to our corporations. And we know now that it's really created a global economic failure. What I call a death economy, an economy that's based on debt, fear, militarization, and the destruction of resources. When the jackals also fail, like in Iraq and Libya and Syria, then the military goes in and kind of accomplishes the same thing and takes out the leader and takes over the resources and privatizes everything and makes lots of money for the big corporations. It's a game as old as empires.
The money wouldn't actually go to the country. It would go to our corporations, Bechtel, Halliburton, Brown and Root, familiar names.
In the last 12 years, that's really come home to roost in the United States.
And now we have people like Steve Bannon inside this administration trying to characterize these resistance movements as terrorism. So what's happened as the indigenous people around the world have risen up to try to stop the contamination of their water and of their land by these oil corporations, what's happened is the oil corporations have hired these private security companies to suppress the indigenous people, to hunt them down, hunt their leaders down, and go into their homes and kill them. To disappear them, to threaten them, to torture them. This is the modus operandi of these security companies.
We're telling our country that we're in control. The people who hold the Constitution sacred are in control, not the corporate state. That's what's at stake here.
That you can be critical of your government and your society. You don't have to fit in. It's fashionable now to take shots at Republicans and Trump and all that, and avoid the Obamas and Clintons. But remember this. In the 13 wars we've started over the last 30 years, and the $14 trillion we've spent, and the hundreds of thousands of lives that have perished from this earth, remember that it wasn't one leader, but a system, both Republican and Democrat. In the end, it has become a system leading to the death of this planet and the extinction of us all.
It's a campaign of fear and consumption, and that's what I think that it's all based on, is the whole idea that keep everyone afraid and they'll consume.
And I encourage you all to go shopping more.
I've realized it's expanded more and more that, it's not just the military, it's not just the intelligence community, it's police, it's the justice system, it's immigration. All these systems are overlapping. We don't need to fix these systems, we need to stop them. We need to push back on them, whether it's immigration or whether it's the military or whether it's, the intelligence apparatus, because they're all a part of the same system. And people are suffering, and we can't wait. We can't wait anymore. We can't wait for change.
Plato said that the penalty for not being involved in politics has been ruled over by your inferiors. What we want is transparent government. If you do not engage yourself as part of the political system, then other people who have other interests will engage themselves in the political system, and they will make the laws and they will deploy the assets of nation states accordingly. Biden saying, for instance, that I was a high-tech terrorist. Sarah Palin calling to our organization to be dealt with like the Taliban and be hunted down. The desire to be seen as a vicious authority that can terrorize people is higher than the desire to be seen as an authority that commands respect as a result of its integrity. If we're talking about creating threats to small publishers to stop them publishing, the US has lost its way. It has abrogated its founding traditions. It has thrown the First Amendment in the bin because publishers must be free to publish.
A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death.
This is a guy who is a real Bernie Sanders supporter, open Bernie Sanders supporter who worked for the DNC. The DNC absolutely rigged the primary against Bernie Sanders. He was aware of this. He was there while this was all going down. So was Donna Brazile. Everyone was aware of it. The guy got fucking murdered after he leaked information to WikiLeaks. If you don't think that's a little weird, what are you looking at? What delusional rose-colored glasses are you looking at your party from? You think you're in some Julia Roberts movie from 1990? This is real shit. Some guy got killed. He was 24 years old. He was a young guy who was very optimistic and had this view of the world where the guy fucking wore American flag pants and shirt. There's a famous picture of him with a beer on. He's a patriot in a lot of ways. He wanted to be involved in the political process. He was very idealistic. He was probably shattered by finding out that the party that he was working for was corrupting the democratic process. And because I've said this before, I've been accused of helping Donald Trump win by really wacky people online. Like, by pointing out all the flaws of Hillary Clinton. Like, look, man, you can't ignore that shit because you want one side to win. I've talked about all of his flaws, too. There's a lot of flawed human beings that run for president, pretty much all of them. I mean, it's very rare you have someone who's not flawed.
Right.
We're extremely flawed. We're all flawed, but extremely flawed who wants to be the fucking king of the world. It's very rare. Listen, man, I'm not a fucking reputable person.
That's what I try to tell
my
people.
Political ideologies. I mean, I'm just not. I'm not that well read when it comes to politics. I have my opinions on things, but when it comes to things that are rock solid and clear, like that Seth Rich was murdered and people want to ignore it, I'm like, what the fuck do you think happened? There has to be some sort of a disconnect here. When a person is giving information to WikiLeaks that exposes corruption inside the very organization that's responsible for the fucking Democratic Party, and he gets murdered, and you're like, oh, the conspiracy theories. No, he got murdered. There's no conspiracy. It was a botched robbery. Says who? Says who? Where's his? How come his wallet was there? How come his watch was there? How come they didn't take his phone? What the fuck are you talking about that I'm a conspiracy theorist when I just tell you the facts? So and this WikiLeaks thing with Julian Assange is the craziest shit ever when he said there's consequences to sharing information with us.
Whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material and often very significant risks. There's a 27-year-old works for the DNC who was shot in the back, murdered just 2 weeks ago for unknown reasons as he was walking down the street in Washington. So
that was just a robbery, I believe, wasn't it?
No, there's no finding. So
what are you suggesting? What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that our sources take risks and they become concerned to see things occurring like that.
But was he one of your sources then? I mean,
we don't comment on who our sources are.
But why make the suggestion about a young guy being shot in the streets of Washington?
Because we have to understand how high the stakes are in the United States.
And everybody's like, he works for Russia now. He works for Russia.
So
he was the darling of the left when Obama was in office.
So isn't that amazing? So Julian Assange, he's just a great news guy who's tough as nails.
Who dances creepy and might have fucked some girl while she was asleep. Whatever. He can't leave. He's stuck in the Ecuador embassy
by the
forever.
way, that case was so fucked.
So fucked.
So fucked. He's been so fucked, and it's because the CIA wants him so bad, and they control everybody. And now they have influence over Ecuador, and they're trying to fuck. They're trying to get a Halliburton guy to be their new. Anyway,
they might just blow up that place. It's a gas leak.
No doubt. Right? I wouldn't be surprised if shit like that happened.
If more stuff comes out, like the Seth Rich stuff, the amount of people, and this is where I leak any conspiracy theories. The amount of people connected to the Hillary Clinton organization, to the Clinton Foundation, to Bill Clinton, the amount of people that have been iced is stunning.
But
some of them are bullshit and coincidental, and you know people, and they're in a weird job, and people get killed. There's a lot of people that have been killed. A lot.